Well, welcome to Ministry Hangouts with Pastor Greg Surratt. We're so excited that you guys have joined us today. We think we have just a really cool opportunity for us to learn and to hear stories just of redemption and of what God can do in lives, and also to learn about how you yourself can learn from guys who have walked journeys that I think you can learn from. So we're excited about that. Let me tell you a little bit about what we do here on Ministry Hangouts. We have got an archive now of over 20 Ministry Hangouts that we are just excited that you can learn from as a staff. You can download them as a podcast. You can go to ministryhangouts.com and watch them on video or listen to them on audio there. Share them with your staff. Talk about them with your staff, and we've got them listed there by topics. So you can pay us a visit there at ministryhangouts.com, and we'd love to help your staff grow. And you can pay attention also to what's coming up next in the future months at ministryhangouts.com. If you sign up for our newsletter there, we'll keep you up to date every month on what's happening, and so you can stay connected. Also, right now for our live audience, if you want to ask a question of our panel today, just hashtag it with Ministry Hangouts on Twitter. Give us your question, and we'll do our best to get to every one of those if we can today on our Hangout. So without further ado, let me introduce who we've got on the call here. First and foremost is this Hangout is named after him. Pastor Greg Surratt, how are you doing, Greg, and where are you joining us from today?
Hey, I'm doing great, Sean, and I am joining you from downtown New York City. In fact, we've been running through the subways. Grabbed just a bite at a deli. There's nothing like a New York deli, and I got connected up to the internet with 7 minutes left to spare. So it's great. It's awesome. I'm here for a human trafficking symposium, and so we're excited about that. It's always good to be in New York City, and excited about being here with some friends. So, Sean, why don't you tell us who else we have?
Absolutely. First, to my right on the screen here, Michael Lukaszewski. Been practicing that for 8 months, Michael, and I still can't get it right, man. It's Michael.
It's
Michael.
all good.
And Michael's with us. He's going to tell you a little bit about what he's up to now. Michael has been involved with the Rocket Company recently, and has been doing great ministry with churches. Also, over to my left, Pastor Dino Rizzo. How are you, Pastor Dino?
Doing well, doing well.
Right, and Pastor Dino's joining us from Houston today, where he is at a ARC symposium as well, an ARC gathering, and he'll tell you a little bit about what he's up to in a minute. And then Pastor Chip Judd over there chilling out as he always is. How's it going, Pastor Chip?
Pretty good, man. I'm sitting here in paradise, Charleston, South Carolina.
That's right. And Chip is on staff at Seacoast and counsels with a lot of church planting organizations and helping guys stay healthy, and love having this. So I'm going to turn it back over to you, Pastor Greg. We can jump right into our topic today. Again, tweet your questions out so we can ask the panel of what's happening.
All right, let me just talk to each one of you a minute about what you're up to now. Michael, Sean mentioned the Rocket Company. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing.
Yeah, so actually I just stepped down. I've been running the Rocket Company for a couple years now. I've been there for about 3 years, and I'm still involved, so I'm not leading it day to day, but what I help do is create the content that churches use. And so we created Giving Rocket to help churches with money, Preaching Rocket to help pastors preach, and Volunteer Rocket to help churches kind of involve and disciple volunteers. And so been doing that for 3 years. I'm still connected there. But just last month, I kind of stepped back from some of the day-to-day stuff to focus more on helping churches individually. So I get to get my hands dirty still. So I love it.
Good. Well, thanks for being on.
Thanks for having me.
Dino, what's happening with you? You're in Houston, and tell us a little bit about what's going on in your life right now.
I'm in Houston at an ARC Exchange. We're partnered up with Grace Church here, Pastor Scott Jones. So myself and Pastor Chris Hodges will be hosting this tomorrow with about, I don't know, Greg, I think there are about 100, 125 pastors, church planners are going to be here. So we are now living in Birmingham, Alabama, and I am working with Church of the Highlands, being a part of that team, and doing a lot of their outreach and overseeing their Dream Center and all their kind of downtown outreaches, local outreaches, as well as assisting Pastor Chris. And then also I get the privilege of serving at ARC. I just love underneath you, Pastor Greg, and just helping church planners and pastors and every day trying to see the kingdom move forward through planning incredible highly resourced, life-giving churches. So loving it and enjoying my role in these two different roles.
Yeah, and doing a good job. At least I know from my point of view. Dino is the executive director, which means that he leads the day-to-day operation of the Ark. We have 2 or 3 directors that are over various areas, and Dino gives leadership to the day-to-day and is doing just a fantastic job. And we'll get back to you in just a minute. Chip Judd.
Yes, sir.
Good to see you, man. And tell us a little bit about what you're doing right now.
Well, I have the privilege and fun to be on staff here at Seacoast, one of the pastors, and I kind of pastor all our pastors and staff and different campuses, and I just love trying to help folks, be the best version of themselves, stay healthy, get healthy, build good marriages, and just love the privilege of working with these young couples and families and leaders, and just a great place in life right now.
You also do some consulting with church staffs on health and wellness a little bit. Tell me how that works. What do you do when you go in?
Well, the thing that shows up eventually is I've been a marriage and family counselor for about 30 years, got a master's degree and all that craziness. But it evolved into my going into churches and working with the leader, his marriage, his family, his staff, and doing conflict resolutions, team development, but really focused a lot on the phrase that I've kind of landed on is how to build a high health, high capacity culture, a culture that gets a lot of stuff done, but in a way that people stay healthier. So it's been fun. It really has. I'm honored.
Well, I'm glad you're here, and you're on staff. Guys, honestly, he does a lot for our staff. But he does more for me individually than for anybody, and probably related to, some of the health issues that we'll maybe talk about today a little bit. So it's a little different conversation in light of your stories. A lot of times we'll just talk about a specific, kind of a ministry skill, and today we're going to go a little bit deeper. I think that it is a subject that is needed. But honestly, none of you are, you don't owe us anything. You don't owe us talking about your story. So tell me, why have you decided, and I know this is not the first time for Dino to kind of sit down with a group of people and talk about it. I know that I think yesterday or day before, you were on a Leadership Network broadcast all over the world and talked just a little bit. Well, Dino, tell me just why have you decided to share your story?
Well, you believe that your pain can help other people, and I think that's what the gospel is all about. It's taking the bad news and with Christ and grace and turn it into good news. And so you want to share that, and you don't want to see people make some of the decisions you made. You want to do all you can to offer your life, your story, your walk, and do all we can to maybe help somebody avoid something, to take heed, or come along someone that is struggling and to help them through that struggle and let them know that now is not forever, that you can get through it, you can get beyond it, and God's grace is sufficient, and there is restoration from 1,000 different types of failures.
So I've kind of walked somewhat closely in this situation. I know that, and we'll go through a little bit some of the pain and some of the process of restoration. But I know that since you have, in the last 4 or 5 months, kind of, opened yourself to talking about these things, have you had a lot of pastors ringing your phone saying, "Help me"? Tell us just a little bit about that.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's been 22 months. I stepped down from Healing Place 22 months ago. And so, the first year you're really spending time on yourself. For about 9 months, Greg, you guys let me get healthy and reevaluate and spend time with my wife and my family, resting and physically getting healthy and spiritually soulish. And then, immediately you want to move to taking, what you've walked through. And so it has been amazing the last year, really starting in about July, August was when we started connecting with other people and going very slowly about that in a healthy way, like Pastor Judd said. But definitely, it's. I think yesterday alone, I talked to 3 different individuals about different struggles and different challenges. That's just in one day. So it is an awesome opportunity to share in the pain with those that are wanting to see God bring healing and just be real. I mean, just here's what we're going through. Here's what we're facing. Taking off the mask and all the bull that we live through and we come off with. And so just loving these conversations. I just feel like they're so healthy no matter what degree they're in, whether it's a restoration or it's a, hey, I feel like I'm sinking, or, hey, what can we do to help other people? We've categorized so many things, and I just like taking the myths off and just saying, hey, we're humans. Let's talk about the human journey and God's grace and truth. So, yes, every day talking to someone who is struggling.
Michael, what about you? Why are you sharing your story? How do you feel about that? Give us a little background on that.
Yeah, for so long while I was dealing with stuff, I did not talk to people, and so I had kind of bought into the myth that leadership is lonely at the top, and kind of intentionally walled myself off from different people, kind of in the name of protecting different stuff. And so for so long, I was struggling with stuff, but was alone and didn't feel like I could talk to anybody, or that anybody I could talk to could get me fired, or cause all this kind of stuff. And so it was I was very protective of myself. And then I'm a natural introvert, so that kind of compounded on each other. And so during my really period of unhealth, I was so introverted and so quiet and didn't let people in. And then since then, I'm still an introvert, but I've realized the value of having people to talk to and not keeping stuff to yourself. And so kind of in this season of my life, I didn't set out to, build a ministry around this or do anything. Good friend to people. Because people were that for me. And when the whole thing happened, and part of my recovery, which I think we'll get into, was that people were willing to jump in the hole with me, and they're willing to get their hands dirty and be there for me. And so I hear that in Pastor Dino as well, of just saying, hey, as strange as it seems, I feel blessed. In that mess, I was blessed, and so kind of on the backside of it, I want to just be a blessing. And I don't know what that looks. It's different for all kinds of different people. So if my story can help or encourage either somebody going through something or help somebody walk someone else through it, I think some good can come from that.
So talk to me a minute, Michael, about how did you get into the pit that you found yourself in? Are there some telltale signs in your life? How'd you get there?
Yep. Yeah, I didn't realize it at the time because, one of the things I pretty quickly did was get into counseling. And so I had this stigma against counseling for a long time. And so when I got into counseling, my counselor helped me understand the issue behind the issue. And I think for a lot of people, there's issues and they're visible. And even when stuff comes out, people think, oh, that was the issue. But really when you got into it, you realize there was this issue beneath that. And so what happened for me was, my issue was not necessarily physical attraction to somebody or any of that. My issue was I needed attention, and I needed attention from people. And wherever I got attention from, I gravitated to that. And so I spent 5 years as a church planner, building on the outside a successful church, but on the inside I was insulating myself from any real relationships. And so anytime I would get attention, I would gravitate to that. And so my counselor helped me understand that it would the root thing was a pride, was a need for attention, these kind of things that flesh themselves out in very unhealthy ways. But it was a system I built. I created it. I created that where I allowed that system, that boundaryless system, I suffered because of what I created.
Well, we'll come back and talk about the journey for you, and I really want to get into maybe some of the boundaries that you've discovered. Dino, what about you? What led to the poor decisions and led to the pit?
Well, it's similar. I mean, what Michael's saying is so true. This thing is not really that thing. And what happens is when something comes public, everyone points to the thing, the moral failure, the inappropriate. Of course, those things are of course, sin and wrong and failure, but you realize that it is a symptom of a deeper issue that's going on in your life. And but you really, at that time, you really can't, that's not really what everyone's talking about. And so, I, along with what Michael's saying, got a great coach, a great counselor who just started dealing with my life and my pace of life and my, unbridled speed in which I lived my life, and was proud of the exhaustion, was proud of the pace. I liken it I was like a guy that enjoyed jumping out of a plane, take it as high as you could, get as much speed as you could, and I wanted to see how close to the ground I could get to pull this parachute. And so often, the adrenaline rush of ministry, of success, the narcotic of growth, was just like crack cocaine of just go, 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 approval, approval. And one day you pull that chute and it doesn't open and you crash. And so, I think so much of what I have learned is healthy boundaries, rest. I just feel sane. I feel at peace. I did not have a lot of peace. I was a man of war. Where's the fight? Where's the heal? And you realize at the end of the day, you've got to rest. You've got to come down into some relationships and be true and transparent. And the other thing, Pastor Greg, is I didn't know how to deal with my pain. I was in a lot of pain in a lot of areas, and because of the way I was raised, Italian, strong, you don't talk about your pain. You suck it up. What happened was when I began to suck it up, it became like a big black hole, and everything sucked into it. So that's just some things that I've been learning, and I think that's why the reason why I made poor choices. And there were 30, 40, 50 bad choices that I made. It was about a 6-month combination of a lot of bad choices, probably about 2 years of leading up to it, of living very unhealthy in my pace of life.
So then came the crash, and so what happened right away? What Michael? How did it come? You don't have to get into any details you don't want to get into, but how did it come down? What were the feelings? Tell me about the first month or two.
Yeah, and part of my whole process was really, and you said this earlier, Pastor Greg, that I don't feel the need to justify or owe everybody what happens, but part of the healing process for me is I'm actually comfortable about being honest. And so just so everybody understands what we're talking about, if they don't know, I had an affair and resigned from my church because of that. And it was a night thing. It went on for a period of time. And what happened was during that time, I didn't have a truth problem. I knew what I was doing was wrong. But you kind of I built all these systems and stuff around to kind of keep that compartmentalized. And so, for a period of time, and if anybody's ever done this, living a double life is exhausting. It's just exhausting. You can do it, and if you're a smart person or a sinister person or a leader, you can absolutely do it. But it is emotionally and spiritually and physically exhausting. I was getting sick. I was physically sick. From having to cover things and lie, and I absolutely believe that physical symptoms can be a result of a spiritual problem. And so, I'm sick, I'm struggling with all this stuff, and I finally got to, I don't know if there's a breaking point or the bottom or whatever people want to call it, but to where I said, I cannot do this anymore. And I've heard somebody say, when the pain, I always get this wrong every time I say it, when the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of change, you'll change. And so I just kind of came to the point where I was like, you know what? If I lose my family, if I lose my wife, if I lose my ministry, so be it. I'm not going to live like this anymore. And so actually the first person I called was a buddy of mine named Casey. And I called him and told him, I actually texted him and then I called him. And he left where he was and flew to where I was. and met me and kind of what I kind of explained the whole story to him, and that's a dangerous thing because once you talk about it, it becomes real. And so once I shared the whole story with him, I mean, he literally drove me back, and I confessed everything to my wife that night, and that was kind of that was the day that kind of changed the trajectory, particularly for the last 3 years. So that was a little over 3 years ago. But it was just that breaking point of just going, I cannot live this double life anymore. And I knew all along it was wrong. It's not like I had this realization to go, oh, I realized this was wrong because I heard a sermon about how this was wrong. That was never it. It was just that breaking point, I think, where God just kind of got to me.
So you confessed it to your wife. Tell me about the emotions.
Absolutely miserable. Absolutely miserable. And so I didn't know what was going to happen. So I was. This is how jacked up I was. I was actually consulting with a church, and texting and calling Casey and telling him this stuff. So drove home that night and sat down with her and just told her literally the whole story. And hurt. And I think particularly for guys, the hurt that we cause ourselves we can kind of deal with, but the hurt that we would inflict on our wife or kids is way tougher. And so just seeing the hurt and the pain in her eyes was absolutely miserable. But I was in it. At that point, it's once I kind of got it out, as hurtful as it was out. And you can't fix stuff. You can't fix anything, but stuff can't be fixed until there's honesty. And so, it was really painful. Second hardest conversation I ever had, because the hardest was when I had to sit down with my kids about a week later and tell them what was going on. They were like 9 and 6 and 5 at the time, and so that was pretty hard as well. So there's no easy way to do that. So don't do what I did. You won't have to do that.
No, I wasn't there for that meeting with either of you, but I have been there with that meeting with several pastors. And if you've never been there, if you've never sat through the emotion that happened in the moment of confession, it's almost like everybody should be there. There's a hurt there that's unlike just about anything else. It may even be more severe than, a spouse that dies, because there is a death that is ongoing and a devastating thing. Tell us about the first when it came down, the first month after that. What was the process?
Well, Michael says great things, man. I really it resonates. But, Greg, I was relieved, to be honest with you. I was running at a pace for about 2 years that was just, you just couldn't comprehend. You couldn't keep up with. And, I lost some people that I loved dearly. We lost Billy Hornsby during that time. We lost a kid got killed in the front of our church on a Sunday morning. I lost another dear friend. And so I was not grieving well. I think I was medicating with just the speed of life, even as I was grieving those relationships. We had built about a $30 million building. I was waging war with the bank. There was a lot of drains in my life. I physically was exhausted, physically was sick. My daughter was graduating. I wasn't handling that well. I just got to the point for about 2 years where I didn't handle anything well. And, I believe I was sick and exhausted and unfit for several years. And then during that time, there was a heavy communication and an inappropriate friendship, and during, which was, of course, a symptom of a deeper problem. And so when all this hit and came out in one day, I had the greatest relief, because I was not wanting a relationship beyond that. I was wanting to be healthy. I did not know how to get off of this train that was just had dove off the cliff, and I was steering it. And so I had 15 things wrong in my life. Mm-hmm. And so when all this came out, I was so relieved. But what happens is nobody else is relieved. pain and the horror and the terror that you bring on other people's lives because you've been living so unhealthy. I never said no. I was exhausted in every way. I hit the wall and got up and hit the wall. I went to counseling about a month before I stepped down, and the counselor looked at me and said, "You should take off a year." He said, "I have met hundreds of pastors." He said, "You're one of the most burnout pastors on the planet." I left that meeting and signed a book deal and then went and spoke at a conference. Just no sense at all, no boundaries, wasn't listening to anybody, was not listening to my. Everybody knew that I was a wreck, and I wasn't listening to anybody. And so when all that hit, I had relief. Everybody else had torture, and it was horrible. To look at a pastor and say to them, imagine standing up in front of your church and the people that you love and stepping down because of sin and insanity and just the way you're living. You can't even imagine that announcement and the pain that you cause on people. And it continues to happen. So the first month was horrible for everybody. I was a little relieved because finally I felt like, and then I think, Greg, the other thing is I was about ready to quit everything. I mean, I had checked out weeks before that. I don't think I was suicidal, but the idea of not living sounded good. And so I was in massive depression. I felt alone. I felt like nobody cared. And so the loneliness, the depression. So to be able to be honest and get help and to sit with a counselor and to work through depression and to work through loneliness and to work through bad choices has been incredible. It's just the pain and the hell you cause for everybody else.
Wow. Chip, weigh
Yes.
in here just a little bit. You're the counselor. What are the telltale signs coming into, and we've heard some of them, I think, and they're very similar, but what do you see? What led up to in both of these cases that we can learn from?
Well, I mean, I love the question why. I think both of them made reference to the issue behind the issue, and I would my heart breaks for, like, and again, forgive me for where this may go, but Dino, here's Dino in relationship with some really great guys, and yet he was hurting that badly and had nowhere to go. So there's just lots of areas we've got to work on. I read a book years ago, and it was based on a study of 250 guys who had gotten into moral trouble in the last couple of years, and they said they found 4 things that were consistent in all 250, and they were these: that their drift started with small compromises and breaches of principle, just little stuff that they drifted. They no longer or never had sources of loving accountability. Like Dino made a statement a minute ago, I wouldn't listen to anybody. One of my rules of thumb is I don't trust anyone who doesn't have someone that can say anything they want to them. If you don't answer to someone with skin, then don't ask me to answer to you, because we've just got to have people in our life that can ask us the hard questions, that can put their arm, that love us and can put their arm around our shoulder and say, dude, you don't look good, man. Something's going on. 2 more things they found was they didn't have a regular habit of nourishing their soul. Maybe that's some of what both have referred to, Michael and Dino. The rhythms they were living by were just skewed. They knew it. Now, and that's the area I'd probably want to say is, I'd like to back up far enough to say, okay, why that even? Like, Dino, if I was your counselor, I would want you to wrestle with, why did I get my life in that state? Not what ended up happening, but how did I get there? And then the last thing was fascinating. The 4th thing they found was every one of them said, I believed it could never happen to me. And when you put all those 4 together, small breaches, no loving accountability, no routine and rhythm of self-nourishment and health, and then the belief that it could never happen to me. To me, the antidote is some rhythmic fellowship, community, whatever, band of brothers that you spend enough time with enough truth that they just know you well enough to say, Greg, you're off your game. What's going on? Let's talk. And that just that in itself would be therapeutically preventative.
Where do you find people like that, Chip? I mean,
wow.
For me, and let me say this before I say anything else. We all fail. Okay, we are all capable.
Yeah.
Point number 4, we ought to rehearse constantly. I have a friend who is an Orthodox priest, and anytime he writes me an email, he begins it with, Father, forgive me, for I have sinned. You know, at first I'm thinking, wow, that's kind of, ritualistic, but if we really believe that and open our conversation with, you know what, I'm a sinner, I think it would be helpful, and I'm capable of, things that would, be devastating to the people around me. So, but where do you find people like that? Any suggestions?
You know, when I'm talking to singles that want to get married, I say to them, don't look for the right person, become the right person. So where to find them is become one. In other words, be a person who here's what it's going to cost. Be a person who's willing to slow down enough to be fully present with other people. I mean, I think one of the things that's feeding our relationship is we're spending enough time together to that we know each other's rhythms, and it's almost like two dogs sniffing each other. You can just tell, I can tell when you're not having a good day.
Yeah.
But we've got to become a person who, when I'm with you, I'm really, really with you. I would be honest with you. This, to me, what we're talking about, the precursor that predisposes us to what we're talking about is epidemic in the church right now. I mean, it's epidemic. Leaders that are living rhythms of life that are just not healthy. I love to ask leaders this question: can you live the way you're living right now for decades? If you can't live the way you're living right now for decades, why are you living that way?
That's good.
That's really, Dino, we, some of us in walking through the process with you, Chip said, and it's great to have Chip in my life, to be honest with you, it's a pain in the neck and a little bit lower and to the backside sometimes when he comes at it pretty strong, to be honest with you. But I appreciate it. But, as we talked about this, and I think, I will say for myself, I feel like I failed you in a conversation probably 6 months before kind of everything came out, when didn't follow up with, I knew you weren't on your game, and you were tired and you were exhausted, and you were even talking at that point about having crazy thoughts about giving up. And I don't think we pressed in far enough at all, obviously. But as we looked at your life, probably 6 to 8 months into the process of recovery, Chris Hodges and I think, were talking about it and said, Dino is present in conversations. Pre-fall, Dino wasn't present. Dino is present in conversations. How did you get comfortable with peace? Because your lifestyle was not there. Maybe talk to us a little bit about the process of recovery for you. What did that look like?
Well, it looked like having a guy like Chip, Dr. Litchie from Emerge Ministry. Greg, you know those guys.
Yeah.
He got in my world, got in my junk, and began to deal with my approval addiction, my pace of life, just so many things that, I had a speech problem growing up and was always someone who had to climb up the mountain. Anything I got, everything I got. And Chip knew me when I was young. I knew Chip when I first came to Christ in Myrtle Beach. I was a fighter, a climber, an achiever, because nothing came easy for me. And so I took that on into my Christianity, took that into ministry, and so I think when you lose it, when you're at the point of where you're losing everything, and you're losing those that you love the most. I never had an issue where I did not want to be with my wife, or I did not fall in love or anything. You know, I wanted, when you look and all of a sudden it like a sledgehammer, it hits you that you can lose it all. Your kids, your friends, your income, your family, all these things. You know, brokenness has a way of getting your attention. So I was extremely severely broken man, and it all came crashing down. And so out of the brokenness, it's like God began to speak to me again. I think I had become hard and callous to the whisper of the Holy Spirit. The only way I was hearing God was from a megaphone. That's not a good practice. I began, I shut down. Believe it or not, Greg, I didn't have any technology for 3 months. The greatest part of my healing, one of the greatest contributors to my healing, was no cell phone, no laptop, no social media, no TV, zero. Nothing but words and waiting on God. So I detoxed from myself and just the activity. Out of that, I began to hear the whisper of the Holy Spirit. I began to embrace grace again and listen and realize that when you've been blinded and all of a sudden now you see the sky and it is blue, you love the blue of the sky. And so I've just kind of rediscovered life and friendships. And then there's some normal practices that I try to do. I try to keep my phone in my pocket. I try not to think about what I want to say next. I realize that I'm not that important, that life goes on. When one of the things that you realize as a pastor, you think you're it on a stick, and the church cannot make it without you. Let me tell you something. The day after you resign, they all go on. Everybody goes on without you. You're not that important. And I saw that firsthand. It really is, at the end of the day, all about Jesus. And so I just rediscovered that and got peaceful again. And just the simple things of sleeping, of resting, of reflecting, of meditating, and then probably at the end of the day, rediscovering prayer has been probably the healthiest thing that's happened.
Michael, how about you? What has the recovery looked like? What's process for you?
Yeah, I think it's different for everybody. But Pastor Dino mentioned too just the idea of brokenness, and I was thinking while he was talking about how broken I felt, because a lot of times you can forget that, and that creates other problems. I actually don't want to forget that, but I remember driving in the car and thinking, complete seriousness, that I should go in and rob that liquor store, because then I just wouldn't have to deal with any of this stuff. That's how bad it was. When you're contemplating robbing a liquor store in Alabama, it is not good.
Awesome.
So I was broken. We went through about 2 to 3 weeks of just absolute. I mean, I can't imagine how bad hell would be if it's worse than that. And so, I didn't know what was going to happen with my wife, with my kids, with anything. And my wife is the true hero in this entire process. And because she, it's just unbelievable. It's just unbelievable how much grace she has exhibited. And so she kind of decided to stay. We found a great counselor, and so that was crucial for me. And for us, really, because we both went. I went, she went, we went together. We still go, and it's been 3 years. It is the absolute best $150 an hour I spend, or whatever it costs. And so that counseling piece was massively huge. I joined a group of guys at a recovery program deal, also helpful. The counseling piece was more helpful. The group of guys was also helpful. Went through that, and then we literally went to church. We went, because I went from being a pastor, knowing everybody, kids knew everybody knew my wife. We found the biggest church we could find in Atlanta, and went and sat there for 1 year, and we didn't do anything. I resisted the urge to try to lead anything or be in charge of something. I didn't want to be on the parking team, and we sat in church for a year and just went as a family And it was the first time. I mean, I've been in ministry since I was 18, so it was the first time as a family we actually got in the car and drove to church together. And so we took that first year for us was a massive pause and a lot of working, a lot of counseling, a lot of conversations. I think soul work, that kind of stuff. And it wasn't until after that year that I kind of felt like, okay, I didn't even talk about this to anybody else for a year. It was like, I need to work on me, and because I realized I was going to have these problems. I mean, if my marriage ended and all that stuff, I'm still going to be me. You take your problems with you wherever you go, and so I had to work on me for that year, and it was very difficult. It was a tough process, like tilling really hard soil, because that's what my heart had become, like hard soil. But once we got to that 1 year mark. And our counselor told us that would be a big deal for us personally, just our marriage. That once you get to 1 year, that's kind of a big turning point. And we got through that, and then continued to progress over the last two. So
good. Well, that's the process for you was a year of just kind of sitting down, being in a church. We're all in ministry, we know that, but some people are in vocational ministry. You, Michael, are in vocational ministry, although you're not pastoring a church. At what point did you kind of pick that up again?
Yeah, that's a great question. It probably took that year, and that was part of that counseling process too, because and again, I think everybody's different. A lot of people I know that have gone through this, they stayed far away from ministry as possible during their recovery time, and I completely respect that. For me, if I was in something where I wasn't using my brain, I would have probably gone into a very deep depression. And so, but part of that whole process of like what to do and how to work and when to kind of jump back into kind of the quasi parachurch ministry. Number one was my wife, and number two was our counselor. And when they both kind of said, "Hey, we're okay, or we think this is good, and we know this is going to raise issues, but we can kind of move there," I kind of felt the freedom to do that. But I wouldn't have done it without either one of them saying, "Yeah, this is okay."
Dino, for you, the process was kind of a year away from ministry entirely, and then another year, which we're coming to the end of right now, where you were serving in the church, serving the Ark under other. Is everybody else hear me?
I can.
Yeah, you're back.
Now we do. You're back.
Okay. All right. Dino, tell me about you were out of ministry, hands-on for a year, and then under kind of ministry with some other people, and we're coming down to the end of that. Tell me about that process. Is that kind of how it's gone?
Yeah, it's been great. I mean, I think that was so important for me, is to detox and to just get over me and my wife and I just be together with the kids in normality, going to church. And I believe the other thing was I needed, a part of my healing was submitting, and totally submitting with no questions. I mean, I remember when Robert Morris looked at me after about 3 weeks of stepping down and said, you submit to these men. It was it's about 8 weeks, because the first 2 months of my restoration was a little crazy. And you know about that, Greg. There was some overseers and this and that. But then when you guys came in, Greg, yourself, Chris Hodges, Stovall Weems, John Siebling, when you guys got involved, kind of that 6 to 8 week period, and Robert Morris said, you submit to these guys. They're not perfect. No restoration is perfect. But if you'll submit, God's favor and blessing will come back on your life, and you'll look back one day and realize that this was all Romans 8:28 over your life. And so I think a big part of my healing was submitting to my wife, submitting to my friends, And I did that, and I've tried to do that, and so that was a big part of my healing. And so you guys felt like, hey, here's what we need to do. You sought a lot of counsel, and I've tried to follow that. John Siebling, the first year, ran point, so we talked every day about, don't do this, relearning. I mean, to the basics of what the day looks like for me. And then when I moved here to Birmingham, the ministry has been supervised. So my calendar, which is a big part of my problem, never saying no, overscheduling. John Siebling and Chris Hodges, they approve my calendar. So I don't travel, I don't speak, I don't do anything without asking permission and submitting. And that has been, I guess now I realize the freedom and the liberty, and I feel so stinking healthy now because I have boundaries and I have people in my life. And as you say, the next year comes to a close, what I want to be able to do is continue to have those things and have those friends, those brothers in my life that can watch my pace, watch as I deal with pain, and then also help me schedule and calendar. Hopefully I've learned some good boundaries and practices. But yeah, I mean, it's been submission and authority has been incredible in my life.
In thinking through this and watching you guys watch some other guys, I think there's a definite difference between woundedness and brokenness. I think that when we minister out of brokenness, there's a power there. When we minister out of woundedness, we wound people. And I think part of the issue is sometimes guys are not willing to set it aside. I know guys that have pronounced themselves healed, after 6 weeks, months, or whatever, and and then they thrust themselves onto the body of Christ, and oftentimes we've got wounded people wounding other people. Would you agree with it, Chip? Let me ask you, how do you feel about that that concept?
Yeah, I mean, no person should decide when they're ready. I mean, so I think both people made reference to it, Dino and Michael. The wife should obviously have a pretty big say in it. Hopefully, some people that they respect and submit to should have a pretty big say in it. And it would be cool to maybe have permission to talk to the counselor, even to just turn the dirt over a little bit to get some insight into how can we best support this person going forward. In other words, what are kind of the, Dino could probably tell you, Michael could probably tell you, what are my potential danger spots? If I'm going to get in trouble, here's how it's going to start showing itself. And you just want to have some awareness of that so that the people around you can kind of know what to keep an eye on. But yeah, I mean, what you said about people that kind of return to the limelight too soon, I would say, unfortunately, that's the norm rather than the exception.
And part of that, honestly, probably has to do with supporting a family.
Yeah.
I know that with Dino, that the church honored some of the years that he had put in there, and then we, as friends, some overseers, had conversations that said, if we have to get significant skin in the game, we're going to do it in order to see this guy healed, rather than rushing through a process. And so that'd be a whole other conversation. I know this is fascinating to me, and I hope it's helpful to some other people. I know we're running out of time. I want to do a couple of things. One, I wanted to have a short conversation about boundaries. Michael, are there boundaries now in your life that weren't there before, and if so, what are they?
Yeah, honestly, to answer that question, no, because I had all the boundaries in my life before. I just didn't keep them, and so the irony is I never rode in a car alone. All the things that people talk about. If you are a devious person, you can get around any kind of rules. So the boundaries that I had before, I think the difference is now I want them now, whereas before I resented them. And the big piece is the authenticity piece. And so I think a lot of times, at least in my world, we talk a lot about being accountable and staying accountable and having some guardrails set up, and those are great. They're just not enough. Because I had somebody come along and say, hey, things don't appear good in your marriage. Are they okay? And I just lied. Yes, they're okay. And that wasn't true. And so for me, it was the boundary piece, but to be real with somebody. And so if you have accountability without authenticity, it doesn't work. And so I think the boundaries in my life are just the same as they were before. But I think I'm more real. I'm more real with my wife. I'm more real with my friends, the people I kind of work with and do ministry. And it's just a more realness that I still have to fight for, because that's not totally natural for me.
Okay. Dino, how about you? Boundaries. I know you've talked just a little bit about some, but
Yeah.
what are boundaries for you?
Well, what Michael said is true. If you have accountability without being authentic, you're in a bind. But what was good with being with a counselor, and Chip said something good. What I loved about our counselor is he was able to connect with you guys, and there was a constant communication between our counselor and the guys that were overseeing me, making sure that there was help and there was repentance and there was change of life. So I was able to identify actually 7 vulnerabilities in my life that made me vulnerable. And one of them we talked about: when I get tired, I make poor decisions. When I have no margin, I will press the envelope. No margin to me is adrenaline for some weird, whacked out reason. If my life is crammed together and it's one thing after another, it revs the engines. It's just crazy. And so when there's no margin, when I get alone in my thoughts, I can have crazy thoughts about life and perceptions. And so, there are these 7, and some of them are personal and private, but we identified 7 vulnerabilities. And I think it's, before what Michael said, I resented vulnerabilities. I resented all that. Now it's like, this is awesome. And what's amazing, I love how Chip said that you and him sniff each other, which I think is pretty awesome.
That's just I love that analogy.
That's another ministry hangout analogy. We'll talk about how to stay healthy through sniffing one another.
Your friends.
But one thing I want to say about that is I really actually love the place I'm at, because you can sniff out what I was in other people pretty quickly. And so it's almost like it takes one to know one.
Mm-hmm.
So I could see it in myself, and you could see it in others. And so it really is turned into Romans 8:28. And I want to say this real quick. I appreciate you, Greg. You stepped in when a lot of people were stepping out. And I think one of the reasons, and I bet Chip can attest to this, one of the reasons why people go back into ministry is because, I'm going to say this, the majority of restoration programs and plan is an old wineskin, and it's broken, and it doesn't work. So someone all of a sudden gets frustrated. I don't believe restoration. I believe it's meant to humble you. It's not meant to humiliate you. What happens is restoration becomes humiliating, so therefore the person who's under restoration revolts. Can you speak to that, Chip, for a second?
Well, we say in parenting, rules without relationship result in rebellion. So when you back somebody in a corner like that, who obviously they wouldn't even be there if they weren't strong-willed, proud, go take the hill kind of people. So yeah, I love your wording. The process should be aimed at humility, not humiliation. That's a great way to put it. And whatever, it is crazy. It's not to me. It's about getting to the root issues and creating. Even like Greg said a minute ago, if you got to reach into your own checkbook, creating the environment where this guy, this couple, this family can go get the help they need to turn this thing back around later and make the devil sorry it ever happened. And that's ultimately what we should all want. I love Isaiah 61, where the part Jesus did not read in Luke 4 is the day of vengeance. And I think the greatest vengeance is when the stuff we get trapped in is the very area that God uses us to minister to other people. and that's just vengeance. That's sweet.
Mm.
So, but we got to be committed to helping each other get there.
That is powerful, Chip. Wow. I wish I would have said that.
Greg, can I say one thing that
Absolutely.
I would, now don't hold me to this, but I would bet a month's salary, a month of my Seacoast salary on this pill, this magic pill. And here's the pill. What if twice a year, every one of us, twice a year, with our wives, was involved in a 3-day, 2-night retreat where we had someone there skilled enough to not let us stay on the surface. See, here's the deal. Michael said something a minute ago. I had a friend who asked me, hey, your marriage feels like it's off track. What's the deal? And what did Michael say? I lied to him. You know what? I'll bet money, Michael, you tell me if I'm wrong. His wife would not have lied. Am I right, Michael?
Absolutely.
So here's the deal, guys. I say it to. I'm saying it to you, but I'm saying it to me. We lie to ourselves. Oh, we have accountability. No, you don't. Is your wife involved? Nope. Then you don't have accountability, because we lie to each other. If your wives are involved, they will not let you lie. And I know every one of us guys listening, that scares the mess out of us.
Oh, Chip, you're a rabble rouser, man. We need to do that. We need to act on your challenge, and we could save a year's salary at Seacoast, and that would be. Okay, I want to. We're just almost out of time, but there's just a couple of things I want to get to. Dino, there are probably people listening who followed you. What would you want to say to them?
Well, I'd want to ask them to forgive me. I'm sorry for the way I lived my life, and I failed, miserably. And but I thank God for grace, and hopefully they can learn from my pain and learn from bad choices. And it's tough to disappoint when you are an approval addiction person and you disappoint. It is very hard, and so. People who followed me that I failed, I'm sorry, and I would ask them to forgive me, and thank God for grace.
Michael, let me give you a swing at that.
Yeah, I mean that was so well said. I hate it sounds that I hurt, and I've tried to track down even a few of them and sit down. Sometimes that's impossible, but there's so many people. It's circles going out, and I don't even know some of the people that I hurt, and so I would say I'm